Welcome to Movies. May I take your order?
Yeah, see. Give me one utterly delicious milkshake, skinny calf, and order of onion rings. Thanks.
One ring to rule them all.
One ring to find them.
One ring to bring them all.
And in the darkness bind them.
Yes!
Hey, what's up? This is your boy Aaron from the Growing Up Punk podcast. Welcome back. Growing Up Punk is a podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. We really appreciate you joining us today as we have an awesome episode for you. We'll be talking with Adam, who played in the band Craig's Brother and Too Bad Eugene, two bands that I really loved and had records that were really impactful for me. Before we get to that, we would love for you to go check out our website at growingpunkpod.com. There you will find access to our YouTube, to other episodes and interviews, as well as album reviews and a weekly blog and all that kind of good stuff. So thanks for checking that out. We love your support, and we need it to keep this show going. And so we really appreciate you being a part of that. So Adam was a part of one of my all-time favorite albums, and that was Homecoming by the band Craig's Brother. And so this was a dream come true to get to talk with him. That's been one of my favorite albums for over 20 years now. And so it was awesome to get to chat with him and just see kind of what went into him joining the band and putting that album together and kind of what happened after. And then also why he left Craig's Brother to start a new band called Too Bad Eugene. So we get into all of that and a lot more, and so I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. Again, this was a dream for me to get to talk with him. It was such a blast. He was a super nice guy, and it was awesome just getting to kind of geek out about one of my favorite albums and just to get to ask him kind of what went into the making of that. And so we get into that and lots more. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy my interview with Adam from Craig's Brother. So do you have one experience in your life that you would say kind of changed maybe not even changed, but just kind of put you in that trajectory kind of towards playing music, and not even necessarily just playing music, but, pursuing it as a career and pouring yourself into it, whether it was a live experience or I would love to kind of hear about that.
Yeah. My dad was in a band as I was growing up. I mean, he was in bands since I think he was in high school.
Oh, awesome!
And had a college band that was very active. On the East Coast, he was in East Coast school. But anyway, when I was growing up, yeah, he had a band that played all the time. They were like a weddings and parties band. It was all like '60s Beach Boys and Beatles covers. And every once in a while, he'd put me on stage when I was like 7 or 8. Yeah, he'd have me. I would sing like "Do You Want to Dance" by the Beach Boys, so I loved being on stage from that young of an age, and just seeing my dad because he was like the front man of the band. He was he kind of worked the crowd, and he was really good at it. And he's in his 70s, and he's still good at it.
Wow.
He's been playing music forever, still does it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so how did that transition, or kind of what happened between then and, were you a teenager when you kind of picked up a guitar, or you took lessons, or just kind of learned because there was instruments around the house?
Yeah, all that. Yeah. I think I first picked up a guitar and decided I wanted to start learning it when we were camping, and my dad had brought a guitar when I was like in 5th grade or 6th grade. And then I just sort of played around on it and stunk at it, but kept doing it. And my parents, I think, were sort of tired of hearing me not be very good at it. So they put me in lessons, I think toward the end of 7th grade, something like that.
Okay. And
then, by the end of 8th, I was starting a band.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just found people at school that kind of had similar interests, or how did you pursue that? Did you feel like you kind of, knew the ins and outs a little bit of, what was needed to start a band?
I think it was just, we just kind of all figured it out together. I had, kind of a group of family friends, like my parents' kids that were my age that I had grown up with and gone camping with since we were little. And they were all from kind of similarly musical families. And we all just sort of picked our instruments and started playing around. Cause my parents' house especially, but pretty much all my friends' houses had musical instruments lying around. So we would just pick them up and start figuring stuff out. It was all awful, but we were having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Like, what kind of stuff were you playing? What was influencing you at that time?
I mean, when we were in junior high, I almost don't think it matters.
Like, would it have just been like cover songs and stuff, or were you writing original stuff by then?
I don't think we were good enough to even do covers. I do remember trying to figure out like "Smells Like Teen Spirit."
Yeah.
With those guys, that song is deceptively hard to do when you're like a junior high, unless you have like just a really killer drummer.
Right.
But I remember trying it and like, why does this suck? Because it seems so simple. It's 4 chords and whatever. But yeah. So those were the starting points. Like actually getting a band going that was real was like sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
And by that point, yeah, the punk rock thing was happening nationally. Like my sophomore year of high school is when Green Day's Dookie came out.
Yeah, classic.
And it was a big deal. But at the same time, it was also when like, our Santa Cruz scene had 2 bands that were way more hardcore. Good Riddance was the one that kind of got really big, but there was another band called Fury 66 that did they did some stuff. They never got like huge nationally, but when they played a show locally, it was packed and crazy, and it was hardcore. So we were interested in that, and we were studying like it was like an all of a sudden thing. It was like we were hearing Green Day and the Offspring take over the radio. We were going to see Fury 66 and Good Riddance locally, and we were doing like historical research on like Minor Threat and Black Flag and 7 Seconds and Descendants and all that stuff was like, I mean, I remember, it's like a 6-month period. It was like learning so much music, so fast. And that stuff, we were bringing into the band room and seeing if we could figure it out and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, so did seeing bands like that kind of, planted in your mind, like, maybe I could be doing this, or did it still seem kind of distant enough that was one world and what you were doing was a totally different world?
No, it wasn't like maybe I could do this. It was immediately, we are going to do this.
Wow. And
how
old would have you been at that time?
Like 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you said your dad was a musician. Like, was he excited about that? Going into that, did he know much about that world, or was it just,
No, like that was what was kind of fun about it, was like how different it's like, looking back on it, immediately my favorite of all that stuff we were hearing was I really did like Green Day, like right away. And I, got into their earlier stuff from before Dookie. But then Descendants at the same time.
Yeah.
And the thing I loved about it was all the Beach Boys just turned up and a little faster.
Yeah.
And my dad kind of heard that, but for the most part, he's like, it's too loud and it's too fast. But of course, as 15-year-old kids, we loved that our parents hated it.
Right.
But they were still supportive. Like, when we would, get into the band room and have our band practices, they didn't really want to hear it, but they were super supportive of us all doing that. So, that was.
Yeah, I remember having a friend whose parents would put on punk albums in the car when we were driving around, and I just thought it was so odd. I was like, your parents are okay with this? Like, they're the ones initiating putting this on? I couldn't have fathomed something like that. So, I guess that's just kind of part of it. So when did you kind of hook up with the Craig's Brothers guys, or kind of what happened in between those years of, kind of like starting those initial bands in high school towards, getting better at your instrument and realizing okay, I can write songs, I can, piece together parts with other musicians and actually make a go of it?
Yeah. So, like sophomore year of high school, I put together, what was kind of an old school punk band influenced by 7 Seconds, and then especially the Misfits over time. We got really into that. But I was writing everything. And the other guys were into it as long as it was fun and didn't sort of cause too much of an inconvenience. But as I was like, okay, we need to book more shows. And as we were getting toward the end of high school, I'm like, okay, high school's almost over. We need to look for opportunities to go out of town. And they were like, but then we can't go surfing. And I was like, who cares? Like, let's do this. So I realized they weren't as serious about it. And it was that same year. My senior year of high school, we did play a show with Craig's brother. It was the first time I ran into them. And Andy Snyder, their guitar player, we struck up conversations right after that show because he saw, I was doing some. It was kind of funny because it was like this sort of old school punk stuff, but I had been taking lessons on guitar, so I was doing some stuff that was a little bit more metal, metal-y, I guess. And Andy was into that, so he's like, "Hey, we should talk." And so then when, like a year later, I think it was, their like rhythm guitar player. I was about to say left the band. I know there's more to it than that, and I'm not really, I don't remember all the details about what happened with their earlier guitar player. But they reached out to me because of, I think by that point we might have played a couple of shows together, and so they were like, "Hey, we're looking for a guitar player," and I was in a band at the time. Like my high school band had broke up during college because a lot of those guys, I forget why that happened, but I was trying to start another band and that wasn't really working. So when Craig's brother called, and I knew they had like done one mini tour and had an offer from a record label that they turned down, and I was super impressed by that. And I was like, okay, this is the kind of band I want to be hooking up with.
Yeah. So they were from the same area as you guys. Like, did you know them before that?
No, so we're all from Santa Cruz County, but Santa Cruz County is an interesting place. Like, I grew up down by the beach. They were up in the mountains. Okay. And that's a different part of the county. And we never really crossed paths other than the couple of shows we would play. So I didn't really know them. They just knew who I was and I knew who they were. I didn't really know them personally until they actually called me and asked me to try out for the band. And then I joined the band. And so no, we didn't really know each other before that.
And when you joined, like, they had aspirations of like pursuing the band. Did you guys, talk about that before you joined, or was it just kind of an exciting opportunity that you jumped at?
No, yeah, for sure. That was a big part of it. I mean, what they, I knew their, like the reason they had parted ways with their earlier bass player and guitar player was that they wanted to go pro, and these other guys were I think they were both married, was a big part of it. Oh, okay. And couldn't really tour, couldn't really put in the same amount of time. And they knew, like, that's what I wanted to do. So that was all on the table right from the beginning. Let's try to get signed. Let's make records. Let's go on tour. Let's do it.
Yeah. So how did that go about getting signed to Tooth and Nail? Was that like, what was that relationship like? How did that all come together?
That was totally me.
Yeah,
in the sense, like, they were finishing what's now like the Keeping It Real EP. Oh, yeah. I didn't play on that at all, but like I had like officially joined the band like the weekend before they went in to do final stuff on that. But they, what was a big conversation the whole time I was in Craig's brother, and it continued into Too Bad Eugene, was like what kind of relationship we wanted to have with this sort of Christian music thing, because that's what Tooth and Nail sort of represented. And Craig's brother, but at the time I joined the band, was just not interested in that. Yeah, the record deal they had turned down was from a smaller Christian record label. The tour they had gone on was this, kind of with another Christian band, and they just kind of felt like that was the route for bands that weren't as good and like could only get those kinds of record deals. Yeah. So they just weren't. They kind of felt like that was, I don't want to say beneath them, because it wasn't like a cocky thing. It was more just like their ambition. They were like, we want to be aiming higher. But I was making the case that Tooth and Nail was at a place where I'm like, I hear what you guys are saying about the kind of Christian music thing in general, but I actually think Tooth and Nail has the same view of this. Like, they're trying to, crack into just sort of the regular musical scene. And I see a lot of their bands. I mean, Mxpx was like right on the cusp at that point. Oh yeah. And proving that Tooth and Nail could do those kinds of things. So that got them open-minded, but they were still kind of on the fence. And I think, I was, they will all agree with this. I was like super pushy and argumentative. If I had an idea, I didn't take no for an answer that well. Yeah. So yeah, like one late night conversation where I think they were just sick of arguing with me. I'm like, so I can send a package to Tooth and Nail? They were like, I guess. So I put the demo package together and kind of wrote the letter and sent it off to them. And yeah, I got a phone call like a week later.
Wow. So,
which was awesome, even though it was like for music I didn't make.
Yeah. So were you?
I was still like, whatever.
Was there excitement about that, or was there kind of apprehension, or what was the feeling when you actually got that call back, being like, oh, okay, like we can actually take this offer?
They got excited about it. I think once they so yeah. I'm trying to see if I remember all this accurately. I want to say like Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo came out like right around that time, and that seemed like, okay, this is, even though that did go out on a major label, but I feel like that maybe this was before that. I'm getting the details crossed.
No, that's all good.
But there was like, that was like an impressive record. And then Slick Shoes were like, they were coming out, and they actually like, reached out to us too. When Tooth and Nail was still kind of like, we're checking out this band. They played the Craig's Brother demo for the Slick Shoes guys. They got excited about it. They called us and they were like, awesome. Hey, are you guys going to join Tooth and Nail? You guys sound really good. We were like, what you guys are doing? And when we heard the Slick Shoes, at that point, it was just the Slick Shoes, like 4-song EP that had been put out.
Okay. Yeah.
Then all the Craig's Brother guys were like, yeah, okay, this does seem like this could be a good place for us. And then saw, what was being put on the table in terms of opportunity to record at West Beach, where like the Great Bad Religion records had been made. That got all of us really excited.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Was there like any other offers, or was part of it like, well, we don't really have anything else, so let's kind of see what happens? Or
I don't remember whether we heard from any. I don't think we sent it to any other like Christian labels comparable to Tooth and Nail. But, one of the things was, okay, fine, we'll send it to Tooth and Nail, but we're also going to send it to like Fat and Epitaph.
Yeah.
And I forget what other sort of comparable labels were at the time. I remember Lobster Records, which never really blew up. But it was like,
they had some
just
awesome
getting
bands.
Started.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually feel like I might be misspeaking. That might have been a little bit later. I know they put out a Yellow Card record, but that was definitely later. Yeah. Anyway, but like there was other labels, totally outside the Christian thing. Not more than like maybe half a dozen total packages we sent out. Yeah. And no, we didn't hear back from anybody except for like a form rejection letter from Fat Records. So that was like, all right, well, this is the opportunity we're getting. So let's go for it.
Yeah. And what was that relationship like? Was there any tension with that? Like once you guys started touring, was there any pressure, to play certain places? I've heard so many stories about that where bands, in a similar place like you were okay with, the Christian label, but then things really started kind of getting pushed on you. Then it was really like, okay, this is not what we wanted at all. And
I'll say from the time that the Tooth and Nail thing happened, I was only in the band about another year.
Right.
And nothing like you're describing while I was in the band, but I can't, you'd have to talk to especially Ted Bond, the singer, for, some things that maybe happened with them after that.
Yeah.
But no, the time I was in it, they were nothing but cool. Definitely never interfered on like touring. With touring, it was just like, do whatever you want. Like, as long as you're out there playing shows, we're happy.
Yeah.
Didn't really matter who you're playing shows for or where you're playing them, just keep playing them.
Yeah. And what was the touring like back then? Like, were you guys trying, to be on the road 8 months out of the year, or was it more kind of tour over the summer and weekends and stuff?
So like, again, you'd have to talk to the rest of those guys because, the immediate thing was get the album out, and then, the album came out in the middle of the summer, and we toured pretty much that whole summer. And it was sort of during that touring that I just kind of realized my own, Craig's Brother was something of a collaborative band, but Andy and Ted were definitely the leaders. And like if I wrote a song, no matter how excited I was about it, it kind of had to pass through their filters. It had to sort of be a Craig's Brother song. Sort of from their perspective. And I also, I really liked singing, and the reactions I was getting from Miami were like, I really would like to just be the singer of a band. So it was like midway through that summer, I had made the decision to leave the band. So after that, I know there was a bit of a restructuring, and I don't know how much they were trying to tour after that. I just knew like I was in it for that summer, and it was kind of a grueling summer. It was a lot of fun. We toured with the Huntingtons, Slick
awesome.
Shoes, Dogwood, and like really became. We had really good times with those guys, and there was some good friendships.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, but I also knew like this was hard, and that went with us. And when Andy and I left and did Too Bad Eugene, we waffled a bit on how hardcore we wanted to tour. We started with ambitions to do it a lot, but it was hard again, like right away. And yeah, I didn't keep up the strong touring work ethic very long.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, we'll get to some more of that. So were you a part of writing the album Homecoming?
Yeah, I wrote 3 songs on it.
Okay.
I think I probably wrote like 5 for it, but at least, 1 or 2 of them. Yeah, no, I remember which 2 now.
Yeah.
They were like, these really aren't that good. And that stung my pride. I probably didn't handle that super well.
Yeah, what was the whole process like? Like, were you guys in a room together writing, or was it just sending ideas, or what did the process look like for putting that album and those songs together?
Like, if I wrote a song or if Andy wrote a song, we pretty much just wrote it on our own. And we came to the band room and like, here's how it goes. And we just sort of told everybody their parts. If Ted wrote a song, he writes a song more like on like acoustic guitar, and it's basically like the structure of the song, the chords, the lyrics and the melody. But then he would go to Andy, and Andy would sort of like, put in the riffs and make it more technical and kind of tighten the screws on it. And I got to do that a little bit with them too. There was a few songs I got to help sort of do some of the development of in the, I guess, pre-production sort of phase. But yeah, for my songs, for Andy's songs, it was totally non-collaborative.
And what was inspiring you as a songwriter at that period? Like, what were you like with the songs, whether they got approved by the band or not? Like, what was kind of making you excited or inspiring you?
I mean, it's probably not surprising to kind of, hear what was out at the time and what we were being influenced by. During the songwriting phase of Homecoming, for sure, Lagwagon's Double Platinum was their newest album out, and I was listening to it a ton. We all were.
Yeah.
And the same with NoFX, So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes. I was thinking, loved that record.
Yeah.
And it was funny because like lyrically, I don't really know. It didn't seem like he was dealing with a lot of really dark stuff, but tonally it had this like melancholy to it that I hear influencing a ton of like the song I wrote In Memory, which, I was dealing with like a super heavy, loss of a friend. And, so yeah, like the sonic kind of landscape of that NoFX record, writing songs about, I don't know, just being a drunk and
right.
and whatever. I was like, yeah, this speaks to what I'm feeling.
Yeah. Those influences, at that time, I didn't know those bands. So when I heard this album, that was the introduction to me to, not necessarily like I'd listen to Mxpx and Slick Shoes, around that time. But yeah, this album to me, kind of stands on its own. Even now that I've listened to bands like NoFX and Lagwagon, like, I'm not just trying to be a brown noser, but I'll pick Homecoming over those bands any day. And
wow.
It's still an album that I listen to, I don't know, probably every few months at least. I just got my second copy of it on CD, so now I've got a copy in my van as well. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's one of those records, and I'm sure there's lots of nostalgia attached to it for me, and I don't know, every time I put it on, there's just there's so much engaging on it Whereas, I don't know, I find like with NoFX, like put an album on, it's like, it's not bad, it's NoFX, but I
Right.
just don't connect with it the same way. So that's not a slight to them. I mean, obviously they're a huge influential band, but so yeah.
Sure, but I'll definitely say that's awesome to hear. But certainly by the late 90s, they were not the like scrappy, hungry band trying to find an audience. They were on top of the world, where we were like,
Yeah.
we were scrutinizing every line of every song and, desperate to make a great record, which, I mean, I know I can't speak for the whole band, but I know at least for Andy and I, we didn't think we had made a record of that level.
Wow.
We thought it like we gave ourselves the leniency of saying none of those bands that we thought were great had made great first records.
Yeah.
They all kind of grew into it, and so
That's
we were like,
true.
all right, this was like our first shot. We'll grow with time. But no, I mean, we thought we had done okay for a starting, but we didn't think it would be any kind of, we didn't think 20 years later people would still be listening to it.
Yeah. Is it an album that you enjoy still listening to? Is it kind of hard listening to it, or does it not interest you anymore?
That's a great question. I certainly don't listen to it like all the time. When I put it on, I definitely enjoy it. Because it brings back memories of such a fun time. But no, in terms of like our performances on it, yeah, like I still hear all the mistakes that I heard as soon as we submitted it. We were like, oh, okay, I guess we'll let this go. But there's so much on here we wish we could have made better.
Yeah, and see, I don't know what those mistakes are. I definitely do kind of get the feeling that, whether it was intentional or not, I'm not sure. It's not, a perfect polished record, like say something that even Life in General or Slowly Going the Way the Buffalo is. But I don't know, there's something to it. And I think that's why I like it so much. I put it on, it sounds, the quality is good enough that it's not like hard on the ears, but it's also not so polished that it kind of, I don't know, there's just maybe a bit more grit and depth to it. So I don't know. I think that's a cool thing.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely say, I think we all worked harder on that record than anything I ever did, and probably any of them did later. And a lot of that was because, I don't know how much we believed in ourselves, or to be honest, how much we believed in each other. We were, we were hard on each other, and there was a competitiveness in that. And so that there was, there was a scrutiny on like literally every line. Can we add a harmony? Does it need a harmony? Are we overthinking this? Is this verse too much like the other verse? Whereas like, down the road, I don't know, I cared less about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You wanted the song in general to feel good, but if there was a kind of sameness across, that's something Andy Snyder especially has always had a filter for, that he wants there to sort of be development. He doesn't want to hear the same, the same verse or the same chorus the exact same way twice.
Right.
And I think that ethic was strong on that record, that there's just a strong sense of development. There's always kind of like, what else can we do? How can we improve this? And that lasted from the writing process through the recording. And the sense that none of it was quite good enough. It was always pushing us a little bit further. And so, yeah, I don't think the final product is a masterpiece, but you do hear the passion. You hear how hard we were working on it.
Yeah, was the producer on this album very involved with that, or was it kind of you guys? Okay.
And that was our introduction to the idea of a producer. We had never done a full length record. We had only all of us had done weekend projects where, there's no producer, there's an engineer. And on this record, we believed we were getting a producer. But I would say, Donald Cameron, who had worked on some Bad Religion records and was a great guy. I don't know how much he really connected with or fully understood what we were trying to do.
Yeah. And
so just kind of left. I want to say pretty much every take we did, he was cool with, and we were like, "Are you serious? No, we have to do that again." So I would say that album is a lot more self-produced. And he was pretty darn passive. The most he would do, and I do remember a couple of times of him doing this, was just sort of if an argument was developing and we couldn't get any kind of consensus, he would just sort of weigh in and be like, yeah, I kind of think, this is the way you should go. And that happened so rarely, and he was so kind of mellow about it, but we respected him. So when he did that, that would usually tip the scales.
Yeah.
But it was pretty rare.
Do you know why, or like who made the decision for you guys to record there versus, with someone like Steve Kravac? Because there was a lot of bands, around that time that were going to Steve, especially with, the rise of Mxpx.
Right. I mean, Slick Shoes was recording their second record, Burnout, at West Beach with Steve Kravac, like before and after our sessions.
Oh, wow.
Like the night we got to Hollywood to record it, we went out to the studio because we knew Slick Shoes was out there and just kind of got to watch them. I don't remember the name of the song, but I remember the riff Jackson was playing with Steve recording it. And yeah, we were like, this is so cool. But we were kind of stoked we weren't working with Steve Kravac just because, like you say, like Mxpx had, now Slick Shoes was, and it was totally the label. I think it was all Bill Power.
Yeah.
I think it was just in talking to him that he called us one day. He's like, hey, what do you guys think about recording at West Beach Studios with Donald Cameron? He produced the Bad Religion record. Generator at West Beach. And we just heard that. We're like, yes. Like a guy with no Christian band has worked with this guy. There's no kind of smell of that on it.
True.
And it was he had worked with Bad Religion. We didn't know anything else about him, but we were like, for sure, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure Steve Kravac would have made a great record for you, but like I said,
he would have kicked our butts.
Yeah. Yeah,
that would have been good.
that might have changed part of it too. But it's kind of cool to stand out a bit because not that all of Steve's records sound the same by any means. They definitely do kind of have that polished sound to it. But I feel like the end product of this suits that album. So it's one of those things. I guess you don't really know, so it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, you're right. At the time, I do remember thinking about that, especially as we were like a week into the recording sessions. I'm like, man, he's really passive. And we had seen Steve Kravac work, and he was not passive. He was very active as a producer. And I remember at the time thinking about it, but I haven't thought about it much since, and like what might sound different.
Yeah.
In that record, but yeah, there's a million different possibilities when to go down the road like that.
Yeah. So I have a few comments about the guitars on this album. So, the guitar playing really stands out to me on this album. The main one is that the guitar writing is a lot less kind of riff oriented and focuses more on kind of using, the high octave playing, which isn't, by any means outside the punk realm. But I don't know, that just stands out to me. I was listening to this album this week and, just the main riff is typically always, kind of octave playing versus, maybe a Slick Shoes type where, it's more like kind of picking single notes for the main riff. Was that just kind of your style, or what was influencing that style of playing? Or
yeah, I think we tended to think in contrasts a lot. And locally, like I say, Fury 66 kind of dominated our local scene. And they were very kind of single note riffy. They did some octaves, but it wasn't dominant. And so, I want to sort of say we heard that a bit more in No Effects and bands like that, and No Use for a Name. Yeah, who also we didn't talk about No Use for a Name that much, and I don't remember anybody in the band being like a huge fan of theirs, but I hear a lot of similarities.
Yeah, definitely.
In what we were doing, and I think the thing there is that like. That kind of octave playing, I think, serves better when you have a song that is basically structured around a vocal melody.
Yeah,
like those kinds of octave background riffs, I think, better sort of complement a song like that, as opposed to like Slick Shoes. Their songs were like they started with those riffs. The vocals kind of came last.
Yeah,
and. So that was a contrast. We definitely, we really loved Slick Shoes, but that was a contrast we could tell that we were kind of more like a band like No Use for a Name, where it was very much like a vocal melody based song.
Definitely.
And then we were just developing guitar stuff to complement that versus like Slick Shoes' strongest influence, which they were quick to admit was Strung Out, where it was very much like the guitars and the guitar riffs and the drum stuff was like the dominant idea of the song, and
Right.
the vocals came in to sort of fill that in.
Yeah, and it's cool to that there is those different elements of punk. When I think of you guys, Slick Shoes, Mxpx, it's all different. Right? Mxpx was more just kind of straight chords, just with a single guitar player. Slick Shoes was more of like the single picking riffing, and you guys, had your own style with the kind of octave. So it's a really it stands out to me, like, and I think that's one reason why I like it. And again, with the focus on the vocals, because when you mentioned No Use for a Name, like bands like that, like it's very much driven around the melody of the song, and the octaves kind of what's the word, kind of go on top of that or whatever, and just makes for a great song. So yeah, I was just interested kind of what was inspiring that, or if it was just kind of the style of playing.
Yeah, I think it was. I think Tony Sly from No Use for a Name and Ted Bond, I think they probably wrote songs very similarly. Like they wrote them, and actually that's true with Joey Cape from Lagwagon too.
Yeah.
The songs would start with just the singer and an acoustic guitar, and it didn't get more complicated until like there was a basic song that could be sung like in more of a campfire style.
Right.
And then you sort of so these they're basically folk songs that you just made faster and put a bunch of riffs over, but you don't want the riff to detract from what's going on. So yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like, man, you must have, whoever was playing, those parts, like that's so much playing up there and kind of remembering where all those high octaves go. And
yes, yeah. I remember. Yeah, on our first tour, I remember like a couple of opening bands would make that comment. They're like, "How do you remember all that stuff?"
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, yeah, you're right. we practice a lot.
Yeah. The other thing that stands out to me guitar wise, and I remember picking up on this, when it first came out, and still, is how many pick slides are on this album. I don't know if I can think of any other punk album that has so many pick slides. There's some songs that have 5, 6, 7 pick slides on a song, which I'm a huge fan of. I love pick slides. It's just usually it kind of just accents a song. But that's one thing, like even myself, like when I'm writing on guitar, like I love just adding pick slides in just like whenever, right? It's an easy little transition. It's a cool sound. It's like fairly specific to the punk genre. And I was curious as to what that was all about.
That's a total Bad Religion thing. Like
okay.
They do that a lot. And it's funny because like that's something Andy was like really good at and his tone served well at. And I will be honest, there were several pick slides that needed multiple takes on my end on that record, because my tone was a little thinner because I'm kind of playing, I'm doing more of the chords and Andy's doing more of the riffs, so I'm not quite as overdriven, and so the pick slides could sound a little weak. And especially because I remember Andy was sort of like criticizing me that I wasn't particularly good at the pick slides because I'd rake my pick down like multiple strings. It's like, dude, you got to do it just down like one string. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things that makes the album unique. Every time I put it on, like I'm always waiting for the pick slides. So it's funny the things at the time. You did it because you were influenced by another band, but now it's something that makes that album stand out. I still don't know. Out of all the punk albums that have come out after that, I've never picked up on one that has that many. So good job on that.
I've never thought about comparing it in that way to other records.
That's fun. So lyrically, this album covers a lot more ground than many of the punk albums that were coming out at that time, maybe especially on Tooth and Nail. It had a much more serious undertone to it and tackled, some touchier topics. What were you guys hoping to accomplish with the lyrics? And I mean, I'm not sure if you wrote any of them or not, or if it was a band effort, or if that was just kind of Ted's writing.
I wrote the lyrics on my songs, which were, In Memory, Who Am I, and wait, didn't I write 3? There's got to be. Oh, in Miami. So I wrote the lyrics for those. And then Andy wrote the lyrics on his, and Ted wrote the lyrics on his. So we all had our own sort of lyrical style. But I will say, what there was as a shared sort of desire. Well, I'll say it's something I picked up from Ted and Andy. They just like Ted is a brilliant guy. I mean, Andy is too. They're both like intellectuals.
Yeah.
And that was not really like my background, but hanging out with those guys, I would say in many ways sort of changed my life as far as that went. Not just in terms of songwriting, even just in terms of like the kinds of conversations and the ways of thinking about things that I wanted to be a part of. They didn't want dribble. They didn't want words that were just holding a place. They didn't want kind of just super common themes. They really wanted the lyrics to be of the same level of quality as everything else that we were trying to do.
Yep.
I would say for Ted, that was maybe even like that mattered more than anything else. Like the lyrics needed to be the main thing that was good about a song. Right. And he's a brilliant songwriter. I had never even worked with any other musicians that aspired to that. Right. So it was really fun to be around, and it was very challenging. Whereas, growing up in this sort of Beach Boys and Beatles kind of, well, I should say that early Beatles. My dad brought me up on like the Beatles, like first 4 records. Whereas I had never really heard, the later Beatles stuff. So getting to know Ted, he was a huge fan of like Revolver, Sgt. Pepper era Beatles, and was super influenced by it. Whereas I wanted to write punk versions of I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah.
So when one of my songs didn't get through, that was usually why. Was because the lyrics were trite and like stupidly romantic without really saying anything. The fact, I will even say the reason I sang My Annie on the record was because like, we think the song's pretty good, but Ted's like, but I don't want to sing it. He's like, I don't want to sing those lyrics. It's like, you should just sing it yourself. And I think it was mostly because they just found the lyrics kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
I was like, that's fine. They were super cheesy, but that was something I had a much higher tolerance for than the other guys did.
Yeah. Well, what's a punk album without some cheesy love lyrics, right?
But I think it would be a better record for the other guys. Heath didn't care. Heath was pretty open-minded to all that kind of stuff. But the other 3 guys were like, no, we don't want to be that kind of band.
Yeah, but on the serious side, like I do think it does give the album, some more longevity because of the lyrics. I love going back and listening to all those old punk albums, but sometimes it's like, I can't relate to, you don't want to be like singing about high school and all this, when you're, our age. Whereas a lot of these songs, right, it's like, okay, like there's still something here I can kind of grab onto, and I guess everything has its place, right? You're writing about what's in the moment. You're not thinking about, 20 years from when you're writing it. So that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun. Ted and Steven Neufeld, the current guitar player for Craig's brother, they did like an acoustic thing online like a week ago. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh no, I didn't.
Yeah, they did Who Am I? And Ted opened it. I thought it was really great. He was like, this is a song we wrote when we were teenagers. And it's about trying to figure out who you are, which is sort of the common goal of all teenagers.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm like, that's like a really good way to put that, and a really good way to preface it for singing in your 40s when you're now like a parent of teenagers.
Right.
And you can kind of relate to what they're going through because you've got this song that shows like, I went through this too.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
I'll have to go and find that. How do you feel about Craig's brother, that they never really released another album similar to Homecoming? So I know that's, there's lots of bands who, they put out an album, kind of gain a following, and then the next album, which I know you weren't on, and the other ones, but kind of as an outsider, did you ever hope there would be kind of more albums in that similar, vein of Homecoming, or was it just kind of a natural progression and you were okay, as an outsider with what they did?
I loved everything they did after I left. And I mean, of course, Lost at Sea was like the first thing they did I wasn't a part of. And I found it totally fascinating. I was like, this is so much not Homecoming Part 2.
Yeah.
And it really took some big risks. And I thought it was incredible, especially because, I already thought Ted was a great lyricist, but I thought he kind of upped his game a bit on that record. But it also confirmed something I knew from working with him, that Ted, he is a fantastic songwriter and a really good musician. But I'll say he is irreducibly collaborative music maker.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And like in everything Craig's Brother has put out bears the marks of those collaborations.
Right.
Like Lost at Sea, you can just really tell. Like Ted was not only like, it was not just that Dan McClintock was like playing guitar on that record. Like he was helping Ted develop these songs. And so they were developed in a way that was just sounds a bit more like Dan. Like if you've listened to the Inspection 12 records,
Right. Yeah.
they don't sound identical to that, but you can sort of hear the marks of influence on that. And then when Steven from Hey Mike has joined, and he's kind of been just a major player with them since then, like that's kind of been Ted's main collaborator. And so, yeah, the fact that they don't sound exactly like Homecoming, I mean, it wasn't a surprise. It's not really a letdown. I would say The Insidious Lie felt like a bit more of a turn back that direction.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's still, I mean, at that time, I definitely didn't appreciate that change. I was, a teenager and was used to, bands like Mxpx, where, or NoFX, where it's like, you knew what the next album, or when a new album was coming out, you knew what to expect. And I didn't, and this was kind of, early 2000s or late 90s, right? Like there wasn't much, internet, and so like you weren't really hearing, songs before they came out, unless it was on like a sampler or something.
Sure.
So I just remember being so confused when Lost at Sea, which we're not going to get into, but just, yeah, it was just like, what happened here? This is not the same band, But again, you don't really hear about like, oh, there's different member changes or this and this is going on, and so, I can go now and listen to it and enjoy it because I have a bit more understanding about that. But yeah, so you and Andy left the band, shortly, like you said, after that touring cycle for Homecoming. So what kind of brought that about? You mentioned you wanted to focus more on singing. Was that enough reason to leave, or kind of how did that come about that you two guys decided to part ways?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the main thing, especially because, first from the label, and then once the record was released, the feedback I was getting for My Annie was really positive. So I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this. So, it really didn't take any more than that. And I also just kind of wanted the freedom to be able, like if I like a song, I want to be able to play that song. I don't want to have to sort of go through the committee of approval that was sort of going on in Craig's Brother.
Yeah, so what inspired Too Bad Eugene? The name, the band, did you kind of have an idea of what you wanted to sound like or not sound like? What inspired the songs on At Any Rate?
Yeah, like the biggest influence, like I loved all kinds of stuff musically, but over the years I had definitely become, if somebody asked me what my favorite band was, I didn't hesitate to say Descendants and All, which I kind of thought of as one band.
Right.
And they did that more kind of mid-tempo, what I thought of as kind of Ramonesy, but much more complex, but it wasn't the double time, no effects kind of sound. Yeah. And I wanted to do that kind of thing. And, I'm trying to think of other. Descendants and All were definitely like the main conscious influences. It's funny. I listened back on Too Bad Eugene records. I'm like, they really don't sound that much like the Descendants. But other than just sort of wanting to play mid tempo, melodic, simple 3-chord, simply. We had worked so hard on like these super riffy kind of metal-y things with Craig's Brother, the idea of just like, let's go the other way. Let's do like really simple, just really kind of stuck in your head melody type of things.
Yeah.
That was just sort of me. And it was going, Andy, where he was like, he and Ted were calling the shots in Craig's Brother. Leaving and starting this other band was my idea. And I somehow talked Andy into doing it. But I think he was just kind of like, all right, like, you want to go super simple? That's weird. Let's try that. And I think over time he was a little less satisfied by that. But for our first like demo and for going into an 80 rate, he's like, all right, like, let's try this. It was I think it was a challenge for him because it was kind of outside his, Metallica basis of music making.
Yeah. And did the songs on this album, did they come together pretty quickly? Like, had you already been writing these, or was it like after you were done with Craig's brother that you started these? Like, how did the songs come together, and kind of how did you approach that writing?
That was, there was definitely not a single song written before I left Craig's brother. It was all kind of stream of consciousness. That was something I was just loving about it. It was the freedom of the simplicity to be able to write a song in like an afternoon. Yeah. And like show it to the guys. We play it in practice like the first time. I'm like, perfect. That's how we're going to do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, I mean, it allowed for a much greater speed of development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there, like, had you thought about releasing this on Tooth and Nail? Was there any talk of that, or were you just kind of done with that?
We talked to Tooth and Nail, and they were interested. They were open, but we were like, we don't want to keep going through this, this pigeonholing thing that happens once your CDs are in Christian bookstores.
Right.
Craig's brother had some controversy because of the song "Going Blind" on Homecoming. Like thousands of CDs were sent back from family Christian bookstores. And it wasn't even that like we found that like, oh, that was a hard thing to deal with. We're like, I don't want to be in a band that would even be in the situation to have to deal with that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were like, we just told Tooth and Nail we didn't really want to be on the label. And, I don't think we were super tactful about that. They were probably not super, super happy about it. But at the same time, the other reason we didn't was because we had heard Mxpx wanted to start their own record label, and we had like reached out right away, and they were like, they were interested right away. So we were like, okay, let's get out of our Tooth and Nail deal.
Yeah.
Because that was built in, like with our Craig's brother contract,
right.
They did have first rights to Too Bad Eugene. So we kind of had to, talk them out of it. So we did. And, I look back on a lot of that, and we were kids. We didn't really know what we were doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what was that experience like, recording with Mike, releasing the album on Rock City, then touring with Mxpx? How was that whole experience kind of compared to what you had done previously?
Like in lots of ways, it was awesome. We were totally starstruck because, this band that was still in the midst of this kind of what it felt like a meteoric rise was giving us all this attention, giving us these opportunities. We were like, spending weeks at Mike's house recording this record. It all felt very like, this is so cool. They were going to take us out on tour. That was amazing. The two things that were hard about it were they weren't able to get the record out before the tour. So we just kind of felt like we were spinning our wheels. Like we're out here on the road with nothing to sell.
Yeah, that's brutal.
We could sell our t-shirts, but who wants the t-shirt of the band you can't get their CD of?
Yeah.
But the other thing that was hard was, and I don't know if I'm sure this was a factor when you saw us play in Winnipeg, but I couldn't sustain night after night on the road. I was losing my voice like every night. And that's not something I foresaw, just, I had sung, I had sung in practices. I had done some singing. I was doing My Annie when we would play shows with Craig's brother. I would do that live. But I wasn't doing full sets multiple nights in a row.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was really a bummer. I didn't know that my voice would be so unable to handle it. I was writing songs at the top of my range because I could do that in the studio and in practices for, because you can just sort of take breaks when you need one, but you can't when you're in the middle of a set. So that made that tour kind of hard. And a couple weeks into that tour, it was like, also just being young and kind of undisciplined, just the same way with Craig's brother. I'm like, I don't like the situation. I want to change it. I want to have my own band.
Yeah.
During that tour, I'm like, I don't like the situation. Maybe I don't want life on the road.
So did that affect the touring, schedule? Did you guys just do that tour and then you kind of stop then, or? How did that happen?
Yeah, we did that tour, and that was it. And once we got home, we were a little grumpy. We were like, hey, why isn't the record out? And it still took kind of a long time to get out. And by the time the record I was actually getting pressed, we were like, okay, we got a bunch of new stuff. Can we go back in the studio? And they were like, well, this record just came out, so you guys need to get on the road to promote that. And we were like, screw that. We did the road. It kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I look back with a lot of regret on that. And I've connected with Mike Herrera on all that since, and he's been super cool, super gracious, and just being like, yeah, we were all kids. We didn't know what we were doing. But yeah, I think I was a little, what's the word? Spoiled, I guess, with just being given all these great opportunities. But I was like, no, I want to do it this other way.
Yeah.
So once that had happened, we were like, okay, why don't we just part ways? Because, once they had the record out, but then they couldn't get distribution.
Right. I was going to say, I don't remember seeing it anywhere.
No. And so that was all just kind of a frustration. And part of that was us. Like, they probably could have got distribution if they could have guaranteed, 60 dates of touring or something like that, but we weren't doing it.
Yeah.
So we went over to Tooth and Nail on, we went back to Tooth and Nail on the condition, like, hey, we've got stuff we're ready to record right now, but we would rather not tour. They're like, we don't care. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So Moonlighting was your follow-up album. And this album, again, brings a pretty drastic shift in sound. And I absolutely love that album. It has a very unique feel and sound to it. So what played into the progression of the sound on this album, and what were you hoping to achieve with the direction that these songs took?
So what I would say, at any rate, was 15 songs.
Yeah.
All written kind of quickly. And there's a few songs on At Any Rate I'm really proud of. But as a record as a whole, it feels like it sonically sounds great.
Yeah.
But I think it probably would have been a better record if we had done fewer songs and developed those songs more.
Yeah, that's fair.
So going into, but it was also an exhausting experience because we spent like a month away from home, sleeping on couches up in another state, recording that record. So our goal going into Moonlighting was, fewer songs with a bit more development on them, but also like a less exhausting recording experience. So we wanted to just go into like a local project studio. We wanted to produce it ourselves because, there was a few places where like Mike Herrera's like musical sensibilities are like very, they're pretty stripped. He's really into kind of, he was into Elvis Costello. He's really into the Clash.
Yeah.
He wants kind of an immediate, he would kind of lay out principles of songs. He felt like you want the vocal starting as soon as possible. You want any kind of non-vocal section to go as fast as possible. Whereas we were coming in, we had a couple of guitar solos and a few that were like a little bit more complex. Mike was like, that sounds too metal. And so we were making things a little bit more simple. We were taking out longer introductions. And in the end of that process, we were like, this feels a little bit less us than we kind of wanted it to be. So we were like, no producer. We'll go into like a local project studio and we'll just do it ourselves. I'll definitely look back on that and say we were way too cocky because when we were done with that record, I think how rich sonically At Any Rate sounded, we took for granted. We just kind of thought that was easy. You sort of plug in your instruments and it'll come out sounding like that. When we got the final mixes of Moonlighting, you're like, why does this sound so thin? My voice, I felt like it kind of sounded really shrill. Too much reliance on pitch correction. And especially because we did fewer songs, there's one or two I don't think totally worked, but we still had to keep them because we didn't have, we weren't doing what a lot of the other bands were doing at the time, which was like recording 20 songs for a 12-song record. Because you can just, go through and pick the ones that really worked.
Yeah.
So, you asked before about Homecoming, listening to it today, and how does it feel? I'll say, like, for all of the things that I hear the mistakes on that one, I still kind of have a more pleasant experience listening to Homecoming than both the Too Bad Eugene records.
Okay.
There's more I would change on both those records.
Yeah, interesting.
And actually, I feel like Too Bad Eugene never quite got the opportunity to make the record I think we were capable of.
Which would have been what?
Just something, number one, I think we did need a producer, but one that we were a little bit more of the same mind with.
Yeah.
Just to check some of our own decision making, and to make sure the album sounded rich and thick. But so yeah, it's something I still think about every once in a while. I've got, because it's been so long, I've got tons of songs.
Man, make it happen.
So, yeah, that's just kind of getting old and lazy and lazy. Having way too much work.
Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Yeah. So you guys didn't do any touring on this album? Like, did you play any one-off shows or festivals or anything?
We played shows. Yeah, no festivals. We actually didn't last that long after Moonlighting came out.
Yeah. What happened with that? Did it just kind of die out? Like, was there much of a response to this album, or was it just a bunch of things at play that kind of just made it die?
No, number one, because we wanted to do it locally and in a way that didn't sort of stress us out. We did sessions sort of kind of shorter weekend sessions, and then those got kind of stretched out from each other as our schedules were busy or the studio was booked. So it kind of took us a long time to finish. And by the time we did finish it, and then it was actually released, we did play a couple of shows, but those shows were a little underwhelming. And so, yeah, our energy for it was just sort of waning. I had a kid. My brother already had, I think at that point he had 2 kids. So we all had jobs and we had lives. And when we did put in the effort to play some shows, it just didn't have the energy that it had, that it used to have.
Yeah.
There wasn't the same level of interest. There weren't a lot of people and they weren't that excited. So I think we maybe played 3 or 4 shows after the record came out, and we're I think we're good.
Oh, that's too bad. What was did Tooth and Nail have any thoughts or opinions on the album, or about you guys ending so quickly after they released that album?
No, they might have. We never really had a lot of conversations with them about it.
Okay, just send them an email, said, "Hey, we're done." I
don't even know if we ever did that. To be honest,
they're still waiting for that, I guess.
Well, I know that's not true, because then we did start another band, which became Thrush.
Okay.
And when we were ready to start doing stuff with that band, Tooth and Nail had gone through a transition. They were, on our time with them, they were, I think, owned by Brandon Evil.
Yeah.
But then he had sold it to I forget who. So now it was kind of
EMI or something like that.
Yeah, there was different people involved. But when we sent them our stuff for Thrush, I don't think I ever got a response.
Okay. And what style was that band?
I guess you would have to describe it as nu metal.
Sweet. So maybe Tooth and Nail wasn't the best option anyways, even if it was good.
Maybe. They had such variety.
Yeah.
We were friends with Chad Pearson, whose label, the Militia Group, was blowing up at the time. And he did give us a response, but he was just honest. He was like, dude, my biggest band is Copeland, and I don't know how to market what you guys are doing. It's just it doesn't really fit with the bands on my label. And so we're like, we understood that.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say that band's direction was totally we had left Craig's Brother and we had done what I wanted to do. Andy was like, this is kind of weird to me, but I'll try it.
Right.
We had done it. Andy was like, I tried it. That was not my favorite. So let's go. He's like, I want to do something now. And so the next band was super riff oriented, super heavy and slower and dark. And so I was like, man, this is totally outside my wheelhouse, but you're right. You did what I wanted to do. I'll try this. And so it was totally, he was bringing stuff when we were having band meetings, okay, what to set our compass. He would play it and I was like, this is horrifying. I'm like, I don't like this stuff at all. And we get into arguments. She's like, whatever, dude. And I'm like, all right, I'll see if I can kind of make some stuff that does make me interested vocally over what was going on. And it actually was a great experience. That band was like the best time I ever had making music in a band.
Oh, wow.
Was that band Thrush. So it was super frustrating that we could not find an audience.
Yeah. Is there any recordings of that out? Like, did you guys make an album or?
We put out a 4-song EP called Eon. Just like independently. I know a website called Indie Vision Music distributed it.
Yeah.
They probably still have copies of it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember the name, but I couldn't tell you if I had heard any of the songs or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you were a fan of Craig's brother, Too Bad Eugene, it would have been like, what is this? It was pretty different.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of used to it by that point, so that would have been okay. The changes. Yeah. So when you look back on your time in Craig's brother, Too Bad Eugene, Tooth and Nail era, like what are some of your favorite memories? What kind of stands out? For me, just Craig's brother is always lumped in with that like golden era of Tooth and Nail, fat epitaph punk like. Does that stand out to you, or do you feel too far removed from that, or maybe that's two separate kind of questions? But
no, that was it. It was super fun to be a part of that, and we were kind of aware. I would say by the middle of the summer of 1998, we were pretty aware that we were getting to be a part of something pretty special. I mean, when we were like getting ready for that, like in 97, when we were trying to get signed and stuff, we felt like we were total latecomers to a party that had started in 1994.
Right.
The larger California Fat Records, Epitaph Records punk thing. We were like, oh man, we're total like upstart newbies. But then when we had our record out that summer of 1998, being at Denny's restaurants at like midnight with Slick Shoes and Dogwood was like some of the funnest stuff, because we're all like 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Some company up in Seattle is giving us stupid amounts of money, not giving us, but they're spending stupid amounts of money to put us in these really nice recording studios we never could have paid for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're getting to go out on the road and play shows where we look outside and there's a line around the block to get in. We're like, holy crap, how do we get here? It was super fun.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many copies Homecoming sold?
I have no idea. We got statements. I'm sure I could still get them if I asked. I think I still do get a statement from EMI like every couple of years.
Okay.
But I don't know what I do with them because I never saw any money from it.
Right. Yeah, like you don't know if it, was 10,000, 30,000.
I literally have no idea.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I'm just always so intrigued. I'm often kind of, in my mind, especially back then, I just thought every Tooth and Nail band was huge and was just like doing super well. And, now that I'm, talking with more of the guys from bands from then, it's like, oh, it definitely wasn't what it seemed. And, but then sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that album sold, 60,000 albums. So, yeah.
I mean, so the Mxpx's and Supertones.
Yeah, I know those ones definitely sold.
Well,
lots.
and like, I know Slick Shoes, like their first couple records, I think did pretty darn well, and Goaty Hook was doing really well at the time. I don't remember actual numbers, but I knew them at the time. I just don't remember them.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still keep up with like any of those bands or punk bands from that era, or are you kind of past that style?
Oh no, Slick Shoes' new album's coming out like tonight. I'm totally looking forward to listening to it.
Oh man, can't wait.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I've definitely broadened as I've gotten older and what I'm interested in, but I still love. I will say when Propagandhi puts out a new album, that's like, I don't look forward to almost anything more than a new Propagandhi album.
Well, unfortunately, that's only like every 4 or 5 years, or.
Well, that's why it's such a huge deal when it happens. But yes, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, there are so many bands from that era that are still, maybe not going as hard as then, but there's still tons of bands from then that are still putting out albums every few years. Maybe touring here and there, and so yeah, it's cool for us guys that are fans of that music that it hasn't totally died out.
Yeah, I mean, Mxpx has had a total renaissance, and has brought like they've partner with the 5 Iron Frenzy, and Slick Shoes is getting in on that, and they're all doing really well. I feel like Mxpx. I haven't talked to Mike Herrera a lot lately. We got to play one show with them like 3 or 4 years ago down in LA. It was so much fun. And Jeremiah from Slick Shoes was there. I got to catch up with him after years of not seeing him.
Oh, right on.
So I keep some contact with those guys on social media and stuff. But for the most part, it's not very much. But what I was on my way to saying was it seemed from my perspective like Mike was kind of entrepreneurial and figuring out this kind of new way of doing these huge kind of weekend events that were being promoted months in advance for just kind of single or maybe 2-night things in certain cities, and people flying out for them. It's like, whoa, that's a whole new model of keeping an audience satisfied. And that lets, the other guys, Tom and Yuri, have, jobs. Yeah. But as long as it's weekend stuff, they can do it. And those are all things that I'm like, if I had a little more energy and organization, I would love to be part of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well,
a lot of that just depends on your life situation. That might work for some guys, and for others, it's like that's just way too much hustle for, the risk of what what the payoff might be. So
sure.
But definitely awesome guys like that can do that, and love it. Well, Adam, it's been awesome getting to pick your brain on music and talk about some of my favorite albums. So thanks so much for coming on today and sharing those stories and just being willing to share those experiences. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. I love going down memory lane myself.
All right, look. There's only one return, okay? And it ain't of the king, it's of the Jedi.
Wow, Star Wars geek.
You'll have to excuse him. He's not down with the trilogy.